You're watching 38IZ videos. This is Val Tapia. Today's guest musician is somebody who has a pretty much near a 50-year career, and this band is known for just throwing out song titles. Most of you will know exactly what I'm talking about. Songs like These Eyes, songs like Laughing, Clap for the Wolfman, probably famously for American Woman. I think every classic rock music fan knows that song. We're speaking with Garry Peterson, founding member and drummer for none other than the Guess Who. So without further ado, we've got a lot to talk about. Via Skype, Mr. Garry Peterson. Garry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Val. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you on your show, on your cast.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're really happy to have you on. Let's get started just right off the bat. This is the Guess Who, this current incarnation of the Guess Who. The album is called The Future Is What It Used to Be. And to my ears, when I heard this record, Garry, and I could be totally wrong, but everyone interprets the music differently. This really does have more of a late 80s bent to it, very AOR melodic rock. That's very similar to the late 80s. Would you agree?
Well, I might take it back to the 70s, kind of, because it was the material was written with the Guess Who in mind and the members that we have in the band now. And if you really listen to it closely, you'll hear the many influences that we grew up with that made us want to be rock musicians. That is, you'll hear influences of the Beatles, the Stones, you'll hear the Eagles, you'll hear, many other of the great artists who were our heroes and really made us want to be rock musicians.
So with that in mind, give us some of your personal favorites on the record and what songs stand out to you.
Well, I practice these all the time because, once you do them in the studio, you don't play them that much on in the show because we have so many songs. But it's the first album that we've ever recorded that I really like every song. When I'm practicing it, I go, oh, this is my favorite, playing on the radio. No, Talks All the Time is my favorite. No, Haunted is my favorite. In other words, I kind of like all of them, and I also like the album as an album, all the way from the packaging to the songs. And really, as I said, this was trying to take people back, those people that lived in the era of what I call the group instead of the single singer artist. And we wanted to take the people that were young then, take them back to that era. And also for the people that are the younger kids that come up to us and say, man, I wish I had lived in that magic era of the Beatles. And so this is kind of a trip down memory lane kind of attempt at what we did on the record. And actually the cover should put you, I just read a review from somewhere in the United States that said, yeah, the album's great, but it's such a cheesy cover. And I said, well, he didn't quite get what we were doing. We were trying to create a cover that was reminiscent of the days when you'd see the Ventures or the Champs or the Beatles on an album cover. And it was meant to, we could have done a fantastic graphic cover of the new modern era, but that's not what this album is all about. It's a return to rock and roll.
So with that, as you mentioned your influences, take us to Canada in 1965 when the Guess Who originally formed around that time. What was the Canadian scene like? Describing to our viewers who were not familiar with that. Give us a little background on the scenery and what was it like, the music scene in Canada?
Well, during the 62 is when I joined the band when it really started. And 65 was when we had Shaken All Over. So Winnipeg was a vibrant city of live music. We had different municipalities maybe 30 around the city, and or 20 or 30, probably 20 closer to. And they all had community clubs. And every Friday night they would have a live dance with a live band. So at my house, my father was a drummer who was playing in jazz in nightclubs, and I was getting ready to go out and play with the band that would become the Guess Who. And Neil Young was knocking on my door to pick up my brother to go play with him in Neil Young and Squires.
Wow.
So that's the kind of environment that we were living in there. It was a wonderful place to be a musician at that time because everything was live. There were no live DJs. It was just live music.
So with that, let's go to some of your influences, music and musicians. Who would you cite as some of your important influences?
Well, I started playing long before the band. I was playing professionally in 1949. So, there
Wow.
was no rock and roll then.
Right.
I was playing big band stuff and playing on shows with, older artists like Lionel Hampton and Harry James when Buddy Rich was playing drums for him. I played shows with the Andrews Sisters, the Four Lads, the Ames Brothers. I played with Ferlin Husky when I was 11 years old, and when I was 5 years old, I did a show at the Chicago Theater on State Street with Peggy Lee. So that's kind of my early influence. But of course, once I grew up and became a teenager, the music of my time was rock and roll.
Right.
So it was an easy transition for me into that genre of music.
How challenging was it being from Canada to get record label attention? Was it challenging to do that? Did a lot of bands really have to go to North America to get to that point?
Yes and no. I mean, we had record companies in Canada, and we were able to do let's see, 3 albums before we had Shaken All Over as our first single in the United States. So we were sort of lucky to be able to do that. However, to make it big in the real world of rock and roll, which was south of the 49th parallel, which is the border between Canada, you had to come to the United States. And when we first had Shaken All Over on Scepter Records in 1965, it went to number 19 or 20 in Cashbox and Billboard magazine. And it kind of brought us to the States, and we kind of floundered around for about 4 years until we did the album at A&R Studios with Phil Ramone in New York City. And then RCA, our producer Jack Richardson, took the record around in New York City, and RCA liked it. And that was the beginning of the string of hits till 1975.
What to go a little forward? So when you meet, how did you meet to come to meet members? Probably the most known members of the band, Randy Bachman and Burton Cummings. How did that come to play?
Well, as I said, I started playing professionally in 1949, so I was a kind of a child star in Winnipeg. So everybody knew me, and I was also playing a lot of sports, hockey and baseball, and I played Little League Baseball in Winnipeg. And one of the guys that played on one of the teams, I played on the Tigers, and he played on the Red Sox, first base. That was Randy Bachman. So that was my first introduction to Randy. And then in junior high school, he came after we'd finished Little League. He came up to me and said, I've got this other guy. We have a little band. Would you like to play with us? And so we started, and we had our first band together. And that band would turn into a group called Mickey Brown and the Velvetones. And we were competing with another top band in the city called Al and the Silvertones. And those two bands amalgamated to become what would become the Guess Who.
So where does Burton Cummings come into this?
Well, we went along and did those 3 albums in Canada, and amongst those albums was the Shaken All Over album, and we went into to the States, and our singer was Chad Allen, who was the original band singer from Allen and the Silvertones. He changed his name to an English sounding name, Chad Allen, and at one point he decided, I think probably in early 1966, he decided he didn't want to be on the road anymore. So we went back to Winnipeg and got the next biggest singer from a group in Winnipeg, and that was Burton Cummings. And they were both in the band at one time, at one point, and that just didn't work out. So Chad Allen left, and Burton remained to be the singer that would go on and record in 1968 the Wheatfield Soul album, which had These Eyes on that album.
Does it is it amazing to you that that song still gets played nearing 50 years to this day? I mean, it's still playing it all over the world.
It is 50 years. It is 50 years this year, because
Yeah.
1968 to now is 50 years. Yes, I think the music is what it is. You know, it was great written music, and that kind of, it lasts if it's good, and I think that it's amazing. I don't think any of us thought that we would have that kind of success coming from a small city like Winnipeg, but for some reason that's what happened.
Just a reminder to our viewers, we're speaking with founding drummer for a band called the Guess Who. His name is Garry Peterson. They're actually have released a new album. It just came out last week, actually. It's called The Future Is What It Used to Be, and a new incarnation of the band. And we'll be playing a song playing on the radio right after this interview for you. To go back to the current lineup, Garry, why don't you go ahead and introduce the members of the band and give us a little bit of a brief background on them.
Yeah, well, as you pointed out, but it wasn't quite correct, I've been in the band since 1962, which is 56 years.
I stand corrected.
Well, sometimes I have a hard time remembering myself. But so the next member, the keyboard player, and he plays flute and woodwind instruments, and he's been in the band almost 25 years now, is Leonard Shaw. The lead singer, Derek Sharp, who plays lead guitar and piano at times, has been with the band, and I shake my head because I just can't believe it. He's been in the band going on 11 years, which is actually longer than Burton Cummings was in the band. So that kind of blows me away. Our lead guitar player, and by the way, Derek is also co-producer of the album, our new album. Our other lead guitar player, we kind of have two, Will Ivankovich, or Will E. He's from Napa Valley. He lives in Nashville now. He finished co-writing and co-producing Styx's new album, The Mission.
Mm-hmm.
So he's an excellent talent, and he also, as I said, co-wrote and co-produced our new album. And so the final piece of the puzzle, which is why we started to, this project, is Rudy Sarzo, who
Right.
and I think everybody knows, is one of the original members of Quiet Riot,
Right.
and has played with Whitesnake and Ozzy Osbourne and Blue Oyster Cult and countless other
Right.
people on their albums. So he was kind of the last piece of the puzzle, and he took over for Jim Cale when Jim decided to retire from the band.
And actually, so to that point, and Jim Cale did make an appearance on the new record, though, prior to him retiring. Is that correct?
Yes, the very last cut, A Long Day, is Jim playing bass. Also, I must mention that Michael Devon, bass player from Whitesnake, played on the album as well. It was at the time when we did that album, we weren't sure whether Jim was staying or retiring, and we kind of had both Rudy and Michael guesting on live dates,
Hmm.
and then they both did the album. And as it worked out, Rudy was the guy that we put in the band, which is a wonderful experience for me. He's a great musician and a wonderful man.
So let's go back to what are your recollections of the Guess Who first tour, whether America or Canada, and who are some of the bands who you guys have been fortunate enough to tour with?
Oh my goodness. In those days, it wasn't like the days where you would do a tour and it was called the blah tour. We just went out and worked, kind of the same way we do now. We go out and play almost every month, and however we've played with a lot of people, from Manfred Mann and Jerry and the Pacemakers, Peter and Gordon, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, Chicago.
Wow.
It's the Steely Dan. The list. I could be sitting here for quite a while
Wow.
telling you these
We don't
stories.
mind hearing that. I can assure you.
But I forget a lot of the people that we've played with.
How are you able to um, survive all these years of so many different lineup changes? And I'm sure you've heard some of the or read some of the criticism online that some will say this doesn't sound anything like the Guess Who normally would and what they're used to. And of course, some of them are older fans who saw you guys in 1970, for instance.
Well,
How do you deal with that kind of criticism? And I'm sure you're familiar with it. I would imagine.
well, I'm laughing because this morning, or was it yesterday morning, I read a review of the album from Belgium in
Hmm.
Europe, and the guy called me rising out of the sarcophagus to bring this album to people. So I guess I'm kind of like the mummy crypt keeper of the Guess Who. And however, he did say he loved the album.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Music is inside people that play music, and it's begging to come out. And I think we just got the right group of people finally together. We've gone through so many people for so many reasons in this band, and life is like that. People go on, they move on, they want to do something else, they want to be a single artist. They have other things they want to do, and so it just seemed like the road just kind of magically opened up for us. And here was this group of talented guys. Here was this set of material that was written really for this band. And here was the opportunity to do it. So we went to Nashville, and at Blackbird Studios we did the album. And it was harder to do, and Derek and Will worked amazingly hard on it.
Hmm.
But for them, they are producers and they are writers of songs, and it was great to be able to play these songs and put them together with this band. And hopefully the people who listen to the album, truly listen. You can't. It's like when I used to get a Beatle album, I couldn't make a decision on it until I listened to it quite a few times.
Right.
And then when I listened to it, I fell in love with it. I hope people understand and feel the love we had making this album.
And to that point, though, how challenging is it to be able to carry on with you being the only original member left in the band? How do you carry on to go forward?
Well, I think, the people love the music of this band, and I really believe that's what we honor, that, and we try to recreate it. And I must say this. Um, I've been in almost every incarnation of this band,
Mhm.
and this is band plays the record closest to the record of maybe any of them. Even the original band, I listen sometimes and watch our performances on the Midnight Special or on Don Kirshner's rock concert, and I go, that's not even close, and that includes me, right? I'm watching and I'm going, hey, we must have been on drugs or something, So what I'm really trying to say is this band, most of the people in this band, including Rudy, grew up listening to the band and playing the songs. I mean, a lot of the guys in the band came and saw the band in concert, which is an odd thing to end up in that band.
Right.
You really got to love, the history and the music in the band, and the people in the band do that. So I'm saying we've been handed a legacy to cherish and to bring to all the people that love the music. And the original band will never be back together, and probably, I mean, even if the original band was together today, it wouldn't sound like this album, because there's wear and tear on people, can't sing the songs like you did. Even I can't play, sometimes, the way I played before. But we have a great energy, and I think people that I would invite people, if you get a chance to come and see the band, come and see it, and then make your judgment of it.
Fair enough.
And now that we have the new material, no one could expect that this band, even like I said, the old band wouldn't sound like No Sugar Tonight or No Time. They wouldn't sound like that today, because you grow in life, you grow in everything, and all the songs, and songwriters will tell you, so much of what is written about your experiences being in the band.
We're speaking with Garry Peterson, founding member and drummer of the Guess Who. The Guess Who has a new album out called The Future Is What It Used to Be, in stores now, online, in all areas. And Garry, thank you so much for your time and your very candid answers. I really appreciate that. If I can ask, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, all I can tell you, having been there for and played on every record, is what I know, and the way I see things. And I'm sure I watched an interview with another band a little while ago, and is Crosby, Stills and Nash, and they were talking about a subject that not one of them could agree on, the way they met.
Right.
And how they put the band together. So, I could be totally wrong, but from my point of view, the stories that I'm telling you are what I see as what happened. I was there.
Mm-hmm. So to conclude this, Garry, I was telling you earlier, we're going to be playing the new video from the Guess Who called Playing on the Radio. And give us a little story on it if you could, and we'll go ahead and wind everything down. It's been a pleasure and honor speaking with you.
In actuality, that's the first single that came off the album, but there's been two others since then that have videos out. That's In America and Haunted. But Playing on the Radio is a trip back to the times when we used to drive souped up cars up and down the main street of the town and go to the local hangout, drive-in to get a hamburger and parade the cars around and listen to the music on the radio. And you have to understand that in our era, when we grew up loving rock and roll and wanting to be rock musicians, our pop culture was not delivered on Skype. It was delivered on albums and 45s, and you waited for the latest Beatles album or the latest Chuck Berry single to come out so you could hear it. And not only that, but it was given to us, our pop culture, via the printed word in Hit Parade magazine and Billboard and Cashbox, and they hadn't taken video and visual to the level that it was going to go to. So we are a product of the radio generation.
Right. All right, Garry. Go ahead.
Yeah, that record is kind of an homage to those times, and the fact that when you're young, you never think you're going to get old. but
Right.
it does happen. But it's still you have the memories to look back at. And it was a really the actual time when we were 20 years old and 22 years old was a very magic golden era of rock and roll.
Well said. Couldn't agree with you more. Garry, thank you so much for your time on this. And we're going to play the video right after this, and we'll get going. So thank you for your time. But one real quick question. What did you think of Lenny Kravitz's version of American Woman?
It was great. It's hard to take a song that's in one key E and never changes and make it interesting. So he modulated up and down and added a couple of harmonies and
Right.
and the kind of the hip hop beat brought it into the more current thing. And
Right.
we got to play the song with him and his band in about 2001 on Much Music in Toronto,
Oh, wow.
live outside the building. So that was kind of cool. At
Yeah.
least we could say that we both played it at the same time and traded off. So
Very
yeah,
cool.
I thought it was great. You know.
All right, Garry, I better let you go. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm glad you got to do it via Skype.
Yeah, and thank you to you, Val, and to all our fans out there. Thanks very much for supporting the band all these years. And check out the new record and our new social media pages, and look for there's 3 videos out there running around, so you can have a look at the 3 of the cuts on the album.
Sounds good. Here's the current incarnation of the Guess Who from the album The Future Is What It Used to Be. This is playing on the radio right here on 38IZ Videos. Enjoy.